Welcome to the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. I'm thrilled you're here. My name is Jason Elkins, and in addition to being your host, I'm also a former U.S. Army paratrooper, third-generation commercial hot air balloon pilot, paramotor pilot, ex-Montana fly fishing guide, advanced open water scuba diver, and a full-time nomad that's visited more than 30 countries on 6 continents. As a seasoned adventure travel expert with a passion for creating and sharing meaningful experiences, I'm on a quest to impact the lives of adventure travelers, the tour operators they rely on, and the communities that host them. Every week, I bring you exclusive interviews with fascinating adventure tourism experts who have agreed to share their personal stories, favorite destinations, and some invaluable travel insights they've picked up along the way. We'll enjoy a casual conversation, create some connections, and likely share some laughs. It's my hope that by the end of each episode, this big world will feel just a bit smaller. Let's get started, shall we? Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. Big episode today. Today we've got Per Jobs. He is super interesting, the kind of character hopefully by now you've come to expect here on the show, but with some pretty cool little twists. Per is the owner and CEO of Fish Your Dream in Scotland, and I'll let him kind of share a little bit more about what all that means. Per, welcome to the show. Happy to have you here.
Thank you. Great to be here and nice chatting with you. I have to just start with saying that Fish Your Dream is not in Scotland. It's in Sweden.
Did I say Scotland?
You did.
Did I really? Because I was thinking Sweden. Well, no, then anybody that listens to this now knows that this is a completely unscripted conversation. Exactly. I literally thought I said Sweden. I know you're in Sweden. I'm not sure where I got Scotland. So thank you for correcting me.
What you should be mixing up is Sweden and Switzerland. That's the common thing to mix up, you know?
That would make more sense. So thank you. Thank you. I absolutely knew it's Sweden and appreciate that. So on that note, tell us, when I say you're in Sweden,
yes,
what does that mean? Because it's a big country.
Right.
You do a few different things there.
Yeah, I mean, we have actually a pretty harsh winter period in the whole of Sweden right now, which is quite unusual because it's such a, stretched out country from, above the Arctic Circle down to more or less, not Central Europe, but pretty big difference between south and north. Mm-hmm. So up north, we've had, really strong cold the last weeks, down to minus 45 Celsius. And even down here, where I am right now in southern Sweden, in Gotland, it's an island in the Baltic Sea. We have a lot of snow and several degrees below Celsius. So it's that dark time of the year up north where that's where we have most of our operations, up in Swedish Lapland. And that place is, in this time, the sun doesn't really hit the sky that much. So it's a really dark period with a couple of hours of sunlight and then just a long night for a few
weeks. How much sunlight do you get in Gotland?
Oh, here it's pretty, the sun between probably 9 to 5, 9 to 4, probably kind of this time.
Okay, so still a little dark. So what do you do in the winter?
Actually, we do, as the name of my company might suggest, we do fishing, fly fishing. But in the wintertime, the lodges that we operate, that we might get into more later, they are located in a place where there's obviously fly fishing in just one of the seasons. But we do use these properties for other types of activities and tourism in the winter. But we put it in another brand because the fishing nerds and the ones that want to, see some northern lights or experience Sami experiences or something, they will not be so encouraged by these graylings or trouts, stuffed up your face. So we actually do a lot of other types of tours in the wintertime. And we also use these seasons for like logistical problems, because especially one of the lodges that we have is very remotely located. It's in the middle of the Kiruna Mountains. So you need to get there by helicopter. And bringing all the heavy supplies out there, like diesel, gas, and petrol and stuff. You don't want to do that with a helicopter. So we do it in the wintertime with a snowmobile once we're still operating a winter season up there. So it's we still have to do that work in the wintertime. So we might as well also be open.
Right. So Per, so what I heard you say is really these winter operations are kind of operated under a different brand, but you're not leasing out the places. You're actually still operating them.
We're still operating it because it's so important everything when we get there in the summer, we really have to have things prepped. Mm-hmm. So we really would prefer to rely on ourselves to get everything right during the winter season. So it's just turnkey system when we get there in the summer.
Got it. Well, I'm super excited to speak more about the fishing. And while we're on the topic, I also want to, let's have an opportunity to discuss this winter stuff, because I heard you say kind of Northern Light stuff. What kind of stuff are you doing at the lodge besides getting it ready for the summer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, part of the thing is that we have, since in the winter time, it's so much more accessible. So it becomes, like I said, a different brand, because more local people and regional people can get there because everybody owns a snowmobile of their own. I think in this county, like every citizen has 1.5 snowmobile. So okay. Even the kids, yeah. Uh-huh. So they can travel the mountains more like we do with the car down in southern Sweden. So that sets the budget to a completely different place. So that's one part of the clientele that we have there. Local people that come to enjoy just a good meal, sauna, hanging out, having a few beers, taking the snowmobile, going ice fishing. And then we are trying to move into another crowd, which is more interested in kind of packaged activities. Because these people that are local, they know how to do all this stuff. They see the Northern Lights always. They don't care. but if we package it in a way and go international, we can have, and reach another segment. The only thing is I have to segment when they come a little bit as well, because sometimes you don't want to mix them. How shall I say?
Yeah, I'm going to let you say that. How do you say that?
Yeah. Reasons for coming, yes.
I get that. Well, just different interests. They're there for different things. They want to see different things. And
so normally we have more of local people renting a cabin or a hotel room and having a dinner. That's in the weekends. So I try to get like international travelers getting there in the weekdays. So I have a combination, because normally they are more flexible. They have a longer travel window, so to speak.
So how would you describe that? For anybody that's listening to this that thinks, man, I might want to go to Sweden in the winter. Someone might be thinking that. What does that look like when you say packaged activities? What are they doing?
They will probably fly into Kiruna, and we take them by snowmobile over the mountains out to the lodge, and then we do all kinds of activities in the daytime, which could be like wildlife watching, check out some tracks. You could try snowshoes, ice fishing, and more or less just enjoy these very remote locations where there's no cell phone signal, there's no light pollution. It's a bit of a. It takes a while for people to understand that there's actually no cell phone signal. There's actually no Wi-Fi. They read it, but there's somewhere. But they're still asking, is there anywhere I can check my emails? Well, no. We have a satellite connection for security and for our own business, but it's not something that is possible to use for the clients, for the guests.
Have you seen clients show up out there with their own satellite phones? I know that, in my travels, every once in a while, I'll come across somebody that has a satellite phone.
They do sometimes. And it's, most people that come there, they come there to get rid of all the connections and so on, especially in the summertime when they come for the fly fishing. So it's when somebody's running around with a satellite phone in the yard speaking, you can see the other people kind of, side-eyeing this guy. So
All
because
right. So anybody listening to this,
this is actually a selling point today to get to these places where you can't get a connection because, yeah, the pace of the community or the society today is so fast. So I think that's going to be more and more important, actually.
yeah,
But I
no,
doubt that we will have these internet-free zones in the future. I mean, it's all over. I mean, Starlink, and it's happening everywhere.
yeah, yeah. I've had a few conversations with folks here on the show about, lodges that don't have televisions in the rooms and don't have Wi-Fi in the rooms. And I remember I managed a lodge in Belize for a while that it was kind of the same thing. We had Wi-Fi at the main lodge. So if you wanted to connect, you had to come to the main lodge and actually where everybody was and connect, to get people out of their room. I get that. So they maybe come over to the main lodge for the Wi-Fi. They check their emails real quick. And oh, by the way, we've got a little bar there. We might be serving some drinks and having some conversations. And it was really a ploy to get people to connect, I guess. So, which is important. Okay. So you're still working in the winter. Obviously, it sounds like you've got a lot of stuff going on in the winter. Yeah. Do you have a down period of time at all during the course of the year?
That's a bit of the problem. I never get a real down period because we have 4 destinations right now, and they are sort of linking together so that we will not have a down period. It's good for cash flow, but it's sometimes a bit intense because we have fishing down south, which happens in the spring and the fall, and then up north it's in the summer. That gives us a fishing season year round. From the beginning, I started my fishing business. It's almost 20 years ago now, down here in the Baltic Sea for the sea run browns. And my problem was that, it's pretty hard to get, the good guides to stay with you when it's only a short season. So I figured it would be just great if I could have a business also up north and maybe employ the guys year round. Then we assume they're ready to move between the locations, but normally they're trout bums. They at least for a few years they can do that before they kind of grow up and want to settle down. But so that was the idea, and it actually worked that way. So for the first years, I was just running the business down south, and then I added this one lodge up north, and this system started running, and it was really effective, of course, because we could also do this cross marketing. I mean, the clients that we had down south wanted to try the fishing up north, and then we expanded with some more destinations. So where we now have 4, and I mean, sometimes we have groups that come 3 times a year. I mean, it's very good to have returning clients, but we can have them returning like 3 times a year sometimes.
Yeah.
So, well, everything changed a little bit after COVID, as for everyone, but the idea of these destinations feeding into each other has been working pretty nicely.
So you've been doing this 20 years.
No, I was exaggerating. It's 18, 19 years, something like that.
pretty close, but thank you for being factual. It's so, and I heard you say you really don't have any time off. You've got it works great for cash flow. You've got something going on pretty much all the time. And that can be kind of exhausting after a period of time. So I'm curious, do you have a plan in place that at some point in the future, you'll be able to take some time off, either by scheduling your business differently or hiring somebody that can? I'm sure you've got great people working for you, but I mean, how do you create time for yourself to take some time off and go explore and do other things? I
have been very lucky. Really early on when I was developing this business, I prioritized time over money still. So I early, started to take help from other people to do all kinds of things. In the beginning, mainly guiding, because in the beginning, of course, I did everything, from doing the books to being in the water guiding. And so guide was the easy thing to employ at first. But I have always been pretty meticulous around having people around me so I can actually have time off, and that, in the same time making maybe a little less money, but rather that have an easier, more enjoyable life situation.
Life's important. And we jumped right into kind of what you're doing. And typically on the show, I really want to kind of connect with what you were doing before you got into this. So let's go back more than 18 or 19 years.
Yes.
Let's go back as far back as you want to go. I'm curious, what were you doing? What did your life look like before you were working in tourism, and how did you make that transition?
It's actually, I mean, I've always had this interest for nature. Being in nature has been, my big interest, in doing different things, fishing and also hunting. Not anymore. I don't hunt anymore, but I used to. But the other big track in my life has been music. So I've been playing music in different forms and also composing a lot of music, and I ended up doing Master of Fine Arts in composition. So I spent a lot of years and a lot of money studying music to then become a fishing guide. But that's how life is. But the transition actually was that after my studies, I was invited to move to this island by a guy that I'd been studying with and playing music with. And he said, we started up working together in a music production and commercial production studio here on the island. And I also got a job as a band leader in the local theater here, doing a musical and stuff. So that's how I ended up here. But the real reason I wanted to go here was to go fishing, because this place has a really nice fishing for sea run browns. Mm-hmm. The transition actually happened. Something happened in the company where we worked. A big newspaper company bought the production company, and our little thing run by two persons turned into a very small part of the spreadsheet. It wasn't as creative anymore. And I think creativity is the key word here, because it doesn't really matter to me what I do, as long as I do something creative, create something, I can see a result in some way. And it doesn't really matter if I make music or building a company or a website or a product or whatever. But what happened was that when this work situation wasn't really that inspiring anymore, I had been thinking for years, about why isn't anyone doing something with the fishing here? Because it happens in the low season from a tourist point of view. There was a big summer tourism season here in this place because it has a lot of beaches and very interesting historical sites and so on. But the fishing season was when there was no one here. So I figured there has to be a lot of infrastructure ready for taking care of tourists. And I did what probably wasn't done very much in Sweden at that time. I wanted to do, or I was actually asking, why is no one doing this? And in the end, I ended up doing it because I figured, okay, this is not fun anymore at my work. I will just try this. And I was inspired by mainly actually American outfitters and fishing travel agencies and stuff that put together the whole packages, because that wasn't really done in Sweden at this time, 2005 around. So what fishing tourism in Sweden meant that you went somewhere, bought a fishing license, and maybe rented a boat. Nobody ever packaged fishing with a guide and food and transports and lodging and everything. So I figured that should work. There was good fishing and it's a nice place, and people thought I was crazy, but I just quit my job and embarked on that journey, and for some weird reason it has worked so far. So yeah,
it's very cool. How big is Scotland?
Sorry?
How big is Scotland?
It's the biggest island in Sweden. It has about 60,000 inhabitants, and from the north tip to the south tip, I think it's about 180 kilometers.
Okay, great. I appreciate that.
So it's a large island for the Baltic Sea, but it's not huge.
So let's talk a little bit about the actual fishing there. Because you mentioned sea run browns. You mentioned fly fishing.
Yep.
I've worked in the fly fishing industry for a long time, and some of our listeners have probably not. So I'm going to let you share a little bit about what is special about sea run browns and why fly fishing. Just share something about that. Someone listening to this that maybe is not into fishing or hasn't been fly fishing. What would you like to share with them? Why do you do it? What's cool about it?
What's cool about it? I mean, what's cool about fly fishing is different, I think, in every destination, depending on the species and the environment. If we're talking about the sea run browns here, it's kind of, it's not like fishing for bonefish in Cuba, but it is in the same time. I'm aware I'm now speaking out of, the perspective of the person that doesn't know anything about fly fishing. You asked me not to. That's what I immediately went. But I mean, it's cold. We are fishing in cold water and sometimes with rough waves and things it's like surf fishing. But the thing is, it's in this magical environment, really beautiful shoreline. You're wading on flats, and you can actually sometimes see these trouts feeding in the surface, and you can feed them, throw a fly to them, and you get really in touch. You're immersed in the water, and that's what I think. The thing with all fishing, and fly fishing is in particular for me, is that you get this concentration and focus, and there's not room for anything else like ruminating thoughts or thoughts about what you're doing tomorrow. You're just there in that moment, and you become like a unity with, in this case, the Baltic Sea and the environment and the fish. You start to think like a fish, and it's like when you get into that groove, it's kind of unbeatable. It's like this flow state, sort of.
Yeah, I love the way you describe that. And one of the things I had written down that I wanted to ask you about was, when we spoke last time was actually meditation, and Buddhist philosophy and meditation. And that's exactly the way I think of fly fishing is if you're fly fishing, it's pretty difficult to really think about much of anything else. It's really easy to just whether you're looking for fish or you've got fish in front of you or you're making casts, it's a constant state of doing something, as opposed to anybody that's listening to this that's been out on a boat trolling, for example, out in the ocean or on a lake where you just put out your bait and you're just driving the boat, waiting for something to happen. There's a lot of time to think about everything else. Or if you're sitting on a bank and you throw out a piece of bait and you're just sitting there waiting for your rod to bend over, there's a lot of time to think about other stuff. But with fly fishing, there's really not a lot of time to think about other stuff. And every once in a while, your mind might drift off, but it doesn't take long for it to come back, kind of like with the meditation.
Yeah.
And I enjoy that. So the sea run browns there in Gotland, it sounds like you're fishing along the beaches, not in the rivers. Are there rivers or what's?
Yeah, there are rivers, of course. They need to spawn, which happens in the fall here. But they're so small, so it wouldn't make any sense, and it would put too much of a pressure. The only time they are in these rivers is for a very short spawning season, and this spawning season is, to be honest, quite disturbed from many other, outer factors. Part of our business strategy is to always work a lot with conservation. Mm-hmm. And we have a problem with, getting enough water into these rivers. We get too little rainfall, and there are other problems with irrigation and farming that takes away the water from all the wetlands. So there's, very little water in these streams. So we have to do everything we can to protect them. So that's why the rules allow fishing for the browns is just in the sea.
Okay.
But it's actually it sounds in the beginning like you would be standing like with a toothpick in the Atlantic, looking at the horizon. But in a while you start reading the structures on the floor of the ocean, and seeing fish, and you get into it, and it's very immersive.
And that's all done by wading and walking the beach.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. That sounds cool. And how does that compare to some of the other fishing program? You know what? Hold on. I don't want to go there yet because I want to. I have a few more questions about your. Actually, I want to talk about your childhood.
Yeah.
You said you always loved kind of fishing and you were into hunting. Where did that come from? Tell us a little bit about your childhood growing up. What made that happen? Was it just because of where you grew up, or were there other factors?
Yeah, no, probably that's part of it. Because I was not living in a city when I grew up. I was living in the countryside, and I had a lot of people around me that would have as their main interest to go into nature for various purposes. My father took me into the forest a lot, and also my mother's husband took me many times for fishing and going into the woods and so on. So that was just a natural thing that you would do. Where I Not for everyone, but I mean, it was close at hand. It was you would be playing in the forest with your friends.
Okay. And where was that? Where did you grow up?
I did grow up in the middle of Sweden
Okay.
in a place called Dalarna, and it's like more or less a little bit south from the middle of Sweden. Lots of forests and a lot of quite vast nature at that time. The modern forestry is changing the landscape quite rapidly, but there's still a lot of nice untouched nature there. But it was really an opportunity to grow up in that kind of environment that we did in the 70s. It looked quite different from now, actually.
Okay. So the people that grew up with you, if they were able, I'm sure some of them do know what you're doing now, but I'm trying to imagine maybe some of the other people your age, some of the other kids, if they could look at you and see what you're doing now with the fishing and the tourism, what do you think they would think? Is that like, oh yeah, of course? Or is it like, wow, he got the dream job. How did he do that? What do you think they're thinking?
What I get a lot is, wow, you got the dream job. I would change with you any day. But, then you just think to yourself, okay, do you know about all the long hours? Do you know about, sitting behind a desk most of the time, not being at the water, So of course, it's a wonderful opportunity to go and fish in some of the best waters in Europe, you know, have that at your hands and being able to spend time there. But it doesn't mean, I am planning to spend a lot of time this summer up in the most remote lodge, and it's awesome. But it means a lot of work. I'm going to be involved in the business there this summer, hands on, which I haven't been for some time, and that is a lot of work. It's not like you're on the water every day. Not a
So
chance.
what's the busiest three in 2024? What are the busiest 3 months for you? A
It's
3 month period. Is it going to be this summer?
June, July, August. Yeah.
Okay. So June, July, August, how many hours a week do you think you're working average?
It's not a problem. You can easily work between 15 and 18 hours per day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And I asked you that question suspecting you'd answer something like that.
yeah.
And I think that's what's important for people to listen to hear. Especially
On
maybe.
the other hand, it's not like I would switch it for something else. Sometimes I think, oh, it would be nice to have a kind of a normal job, grown-up job where you go in the morning to the office and you do some stuff and then you forget about it when you go home. But come on, I have done this very dynamic and flexible work situation for so many years. I don't think I could just turn into such a, even though it sounds a bit tempting, just go home and meditate.
No, I get it. And I also envision like sometimes maybe your clients, show up there and meet you for the first time and they're looking at you like, wow, dream job, basically what you were just describing. And they're there on vacation and maybe they're there with you for a week and they're out fishing every day and sitting in the, jacuzzi or the sauna or whatever setting you have set up for them. And looking at you thinking, man, you live this life every day. You're out fishing every day and sitting in the sauna every day and, drinking vodka with, every day or whatever. I suspect it's a little bit different. Is that the experience you have? Is it Do you realize that sometimes your guests maybe aren't completely in touch with what you're doing?
Of course, they don't know all the behind the scenes. I mean, if they sometimes, when we do, you think of that sometimes when you're doing this winter work, which is really hard. You go with the snowmobile and it's super cold, and you run off the track, and the whole, whatever cargo you have goes into the snow, and you have to redo it, and everything is just living hell. And that's all to prepare for these few weeks in the summer when these people are coming. There's so much work to get that to actually, function perfectly when they're there in the summer. They have no idea.
Yeah, it's
So it's part of the show. It's like, yeah, we do this. It's easy, I think they like that image of the crew, or as you say, me as some sort of, this guy has it all, so to speak. It's part of the deal. For me, it's the most enjoyable thing is when they are really having the time of their life. I mean, that's the best. It's
kind of cool, because it's a reflection that you did exactly what you're trying to do. You worked your ass off to create a situation where they could come, fly into your lodge and enjoy themselves and not think about how did the petrol get here for the boats? How did the food get here? How did all these things, because you don't want them thinking about that. That's because that reminds them of their own struggles and challenges back home. It's, I've been with tour operators. I've been with lodge owners that really like to spend a lot of time sharing how difficult and how hard they worked to make all this available for you. And it's just not fun, to be honest with you. It's just not fun to listen to them talk about how hard their life is to make all this happen for you. It's hard to sit there and enjoy it when you almost feel guilty. You're like, oh man, I was going to have another shot of vodka, but now that I realize you brought it out behind a snowmobile 3 months ago, maybe I won't.
Exactly.
Yeah, I get that.
That's part of the show. Yeah.
It's pretty cool. And okay, so you described kind of your childhood growing up and doing some of this outdoor stuff. And I really want to touch on the music stuff again, because how did the music enter your life?
Well, it was there from the beginning. A lot of people around me, they were playing instruments. They were playing mainly folk music, like the local variant of fiddle music that is common in Sweden. So I had that around me, since I was born. I more or less, or each and other night, I fell asleep to the sound of people playing somewhere in the house. So that's childhood memories of falling asleep to the sound of this kind of music. So it was with me from the beginning, and I started singing in the church choir and all that, that stuff, and playing different instruments, and then I started taking, it was mostly the piano that I played more seriously, and studied jazz piano, and got into that and started writing music. So that's how I ended up in this in the Royal Academy of Music in Stockholm to study big band music. Actually, I wrote stuff for big band. Yeah, so it's cool. I got a scholarship to go to New York to hang in all the clubs, and I spent time with one of the contemporary jazz big band composers at the time. Still is. She's still a name. I just can't think of it because I'm talking to someone from the States. So that's but I mean, I was there at the time, and then this huge shift came along, and yeah.
That's very cool. It's one of the interesting things about, I think, tour operators, but specifically kind of more the adventure tour operators. And I consider, for me, adventure tours has to do with just things kind of outside of the comfort zone, just a little different, whether that's, fly fishing, even sometimes cultural, foodie type of tours where you're getting out and really connecting with people as opposed to, being on a big cruise ship or at a resort hotel. But so when I say, specifically adventure tour operators that I've spoken with, they're usually kind of, I guess I want to say, an eclectic type of group of people. It's a surprising number of them have varied interests like music or theater. I was a theater major in college. The first time I was theater and vocal music. I was there on a theater and vocal music scholarship, and and then was a fishing guide like yourself. So I mean, I'm not. But it's, and I think it's just comes down to the curiosity. I think that artistic and creative people are just tend to be curious people. And I think that adventure travelers, I'm going to start with adventure travelers, are curious. They want to see things, experience things, and they're just open to the world. And then that same type of person is the same type of person that becomes a tour operator because they're curious. They want to learn about the world. And then curious people tend to want to share what they've learned with other curious people.
Yep.
And then you've got a guide or a tour operator. Yeah. And I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
What do you think?
That really makes sense. And in Sweden, and I don't know, maybe elsewhere as well, but I have seen a very, unlikely high connection between jazz musicians and fly fishing is a thing,
Yeah.
So what you say, it's that whole being in the moment, kind of improv, being immersed. And also the fly fishing has this, I wouldn't say theoretical, but philosophical side to it. You have to, you also have to learn a lot of stuff about, the insects, the life cycle of different insects, and learn to read the water. There's so much stuff around it that you need to know at least something about before you can hit the zone with this, this unity with the fishing experience.
I think if you're not a curious person, I think fly fishing would be a really miserable sport for someone that's not curious.
Exactly.
Because there's so much to learn and to think about, which is, of course, what keeps you in the present, and you're not thinking about work because there's so much going on. And music's the same way. Yeah. I would, to me.
You have to be on the spot in the time, in the moment, creating with other people. It's the same kind of thing. And about the curiosity, I mean, my own fly fishing travel has taken me to places I would never have seen. And I've met people I would never have met without the reason of fly fishing. So sometimes what you take with you, what you take home from a trip, is not necessarily that big fish that you caught somewhere. It's more likely it's an encounter or a place or a culture or something else. That's what you tell your kids about later or think about 10 years later. It's not the big grayling or bonefish. It's
something else. The person you connected with, maybe it's the guide you connected with. Maybe it's your child. Maybe your child traveled with you or a parent or
the guy that won't let you leave the restaurant without you buying his private lobsters that he has in a freezer.
Yeah.
For your 4-hour cloud mountain trip. That kind of stuff. That's what you remember.
It reminds me of someone, and I don't know if it was someone wrote this, but I remember when I was in Montana guiding trout in Montana, it came up. It was something about, we like to trout fish because trout live in beautiful places. It's like, it's a really good excuse to go see some really cool places. I've seen some amazing things that started out in quest for trout, but then became something so much bigger and so much deeper. So,
yeah. And in this day and age, we can really use, for example, the trout as an indicator, as a measurement of the quality of the nature or the water there, because they won't be there if it's polluted or if it's, so we have to look at these creatures from that perspective as well. And that's also what I think, what's inspiring me is to sort of educate in the same time. Mm-hmm. We have all our clients are with guests. All our guests are with guides all the time. Mm-hmm. And, most anglers think that they know, everything from how to handle fish and how to fight fish without, damaging them and about the ecology and stuff. But, there's so much more to learn, and if you can get your guests to learn a little bit more, be it about the ecosystem or the local Sami community, they will be more likely to protect the stuff that they know and care about the stuff, stuff that we don't know about, we don't care about. And that's sadly enough what happens with fish a lot, because it's under the surface. We have no idea what happens to the sharks when, they get finned by the thousands or whatever. As soon as we know, we start to care. And that's like a little small mission that you can work with each person to open them up to something new that they didn't know before.
And I think that's the case for a lot of tourism. Everything from going to see a rhinoceros in Africa to catching a sea run brown in Sweden to, seeing manatees in the Caribbean or whatever. If we don't see those things, if we aren't interested in those things, then we just don't care. Unfortunately, it just kind of sucks. But that's fly fishing has done tremendous things to help conservation in many places in the world. Because the fly fishermen are like, no, this is important to me. It's important to me. It's important to us. It's important to the community to protect these rivers. And by protecting the rivers, they keep the fish in them, and that keeps the tourists coming and the dollars, and it's all connected. So yeah, I think that's. I
think it's for us. It's very important to push the boundaries there. So we really have the best available knowledge about these things. And so, for example, we did a cooperation with a local university, or it's one of the oldest universities in Sweden, actually, that around this sea brown browns. So we had them scientists join us fishing both with clients and with guides, and take blood samples just before we release the fish, and check other markers on the fish as well to see how they react on the catch and release process in different circumstances, temperature, what sex is the fish, and so on. Catch and release, most people would know. We release 99% of the fish, more or less, because people don't want to kill them. That's not the point, at least not in the people that come to us. But I mean, we're pushing the boundaries here to the point where someone says, well, maybe you shouldn't investigate that, because maybe you'll find out that there is really an ethical problem with the releasing the fish. But we figured we really want to know what we're doing, making money from, there must be some sort of suffering involved. There's no denying. So we really need to do our best to see how we do it and how does it affect the fish. And anyway, these studies have shown that there's a super high survivability, and they revive, to a very high percentage if handled right.
I think that's super interesting and important. And I'm also aware of other studies where they've looked at, the value of fish in relation to the tourism dollars that they bring in. And I don't remember the numbers, but I think it was maybe the Bahamas or Belize that looked at bonefish and came up with this number that, a bonefish was worth $1,000. I don't remember the deal, but the bonefish was worth $1,000 because you look at all the tourism dollars that come in as a result of, fishermen that are coming in catch and release again. And, as opposed to, basically a justification for the protection of these species, as opposed to setting out nets. So the local fishermen could net the bonefish and sell them in the market for $3. They could say, look, this bonefish is worth $1,000. So I think that a lot of those studies are quite interesting.
Yeah. And I think it's important that you do them, even though they might kind of miscredit you, or, I mean, we're working with living creatures here. And so that's a huge responsibility that comes around this, to do it really responsibly.
Yeah. And I think this ties in well to the conversation last time you and I spoke. We spoke a little bit about kind of the indigenous people that you are partnering with, because, speaking about living entities and impact of tourism and conservation and sustainability. This is a big part of the conversation. So tell us a little bit about kind of what you're doing with the indigenous peoples there in Sweden.
It looks a little bit different in the different areas where we are active, but there's one special, that's one place that has some special interest around it right now. In Sweden, there has been one of the Sami communities where one of our lodges is located. This community, they did a lawsuit against the Swedish government for stealing their hunting and fishing rights. And, nobody thought this would lead anywhere, but it was a 9-year process, and there is now a high court verdict that the Sami community was right. So this quite, in numbers small group got all the fishing and hunting rights for a very large chunk of land. So this has been a political and it's been, to be honest, a shitstorm. Because there's so much conflict that has been growing around this, because all of a sudden only the local people there could access these huge areas, and there is some sort of, nobody knows what will happen since it's a high court verdict, it might spread in the whole country for all the Sami communities, and that would cover, a big part of the Swedish land mass. So it's a very important verdict that will change the game completely for hunting and fishing in Sweden. So we were in this pioneer area where we, of course, when this high court verdict came, we didn't have any fishing rights. So we had a lodge with, sold rods and everything and no fishing. Found in our talks with the Sami community, we found a way of doing a really nice agreement that lets us stay there in a way that benefits, nature more than it did before, and we can connect more with the Sami community, and they get some more money out of this. And mainly what they want is conservation, less people in the mountain hunting, fishing, less helicopters, less, stuff going on. And to be honest, in the Swedish mountains, there are areas that have become really polluted and where people don't really behave. In Sweden, we have this, freedom, what's it called? Freedom to roam, so to speak. It's, you have public access everywhere. And there's a backside to that. It worked, better before, when there was mostly Swedish people that grew up in the, kind of local area and knew how to behave. But we have other, there's more tourism, and the uncontrolled tourism will bring these problems up more and more. And I think this is one example of what will happen in the future if we don't organize the tourism better and more,
Right. Well, it sounds like, in a sense, what happened is the court ruling gave the Sami community the ability to decide how they want to manage the resource.
Exactly.
It wasn't so much that they are the only ones that can use it. You have to be Sami in order to catch a fish. It's that, hey, they now have the ability to decide, who do we want to partner with? What sort of limitations do we want to put on the use, catch rate, stuff like that? Is that the case?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
In our case, they leave most of the kind of details around fishing rules and catch rates and stuff to us, because but the main thing is we get this beautiful stretch of river, and we know that we have this resource, and we know, we can set the rules to keep the quality in place. And then there's always the debate, public waters versus private waters. It's probably big where you are as well, but there are so many miles of running rivers in Sweden, and I think there's really an opportunity in keeping zones where this zone here is really suitable for this touristic kind of business that we are doing, and that'll benefit most people the most.
Right. Very cool.
In certain areas, and you should look at it at that. I think they have. I don't know if you know about the term maximum sustainable yield.
Mm-hmm.
How much fish can you take out of a population before it collapses? That's how you
Yeah.
look. Maybe you should manage fish with maximum societal yield or something. How do we use this resource in really the best way, and not just looking at how do we manage it to not deplete it and make cat food and food out of it, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting stuff. And I also want to take advantage of the opportunity while I've got you here to help our listeners learn a little bit more about Sweden, because we're talking about the Sami people. I don't know anything about them, honestly, other than, brief conversation I had with you before we got on this call and the conversation we're having here. So what would you like people to know about the indigenous peoples of Sweden? Just kind of an overview. So next time they hear the term Sami, they have some clue what that's all about.
All right. The best thing would be if somebody that was actually a Sami would tell that story. But of course, I think I can do the job here and now. They are reindeer herders, and they were up in northern Sweden, way before there were any Swedish people, and they consider their country. It's called Sapmi, and it includes Norway, northern Sweden, northern Finland, and part of Russia, because it's the same kind of nomadic people that follow the reindeer. Today, of course, it's more mechanized, but there are still reindeer herders, many of them. They are these indigenous people. They are like other indigenous. They live really close to nature, in harmony with nature. They have a long-term perspective on the lands, on how to manage nature. When you're a Swedish businessman, you might want to, if you ask them, can we do this? What do you think about, we could do this? And you think it takes a long time to get a reply. Then you have to keep in mind that they kind of think, how will this decision affect 5 generations from now? And that's, we should have more of that in our own business models or strategies. We don't think more than 5 years, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Normally.
So I'm curious, if you described everything you just described about them, about the Sami people, but didn't use the word Sami, the word I would come up with is Laplanders. Mm-hmm. And I don't know anything about that term. I've just heard it. Mm-hmm. I suspect there's other people out there. What is the difference between Lapland?
I think what you would probably mean with that word is a Sami person.
Okay.
That's what I think. I don't think it would be very appreciated. Lapland is also Swedish. We talk about Swedish Lapland. It's actually just a geographical region, a decision.
Okay.
So technically, anyone living in this area would be a Laplander. But I still think that at least in my mind, make the connection between the Sami and a Laplander, because I've seen The Naked Gun, and they make a joke about a Laplander cutting, this Frank Drebin's balls off. So I have an idea that Americans think that.
I did not see that episode. I didn't see that movie. Well, maybe I did, but I don't remember that. I just think of up north. Yeah. When you say reindeer herders, northern, that part of the world, I think of, okay, is that region called Lapland? Would that be Laplanders?
Yes, you're touching upon it. And so they follow, the reindeers are up in the mountains in the summer for grazing. And then in the winter, they go down towards the sea.
Okay.
So it looks a little bit different in the different parts of this northern region, where and how the reindeers move. But traditionally, the Sami have been traveling with the reindeer between the mountains and the coast. So this place where we have a lodge called Chonajok, it's actually a summer place for the Sami when they were there with the reindeers in the summer. So I've actually met people that are born out there in this really remote location.
Yeah.
It's not
now, are your guests able to engage with the local people? I don't even know how to ask the question. I'm just trying to like get a feel for like how much opportunity your clients have to engage with the Sami people and maybe see some of these cool things that you just wouldn't see elsewhere.
It's different between the lodges. One of the lodges we have is in a village where you can actually arrive by car, and there are Sami people living there and Swedish people, and there we do offer like outings with Sami to learn about Sami culture and Sami lifestyle and religion and so on. We have multi-day tours where you join Sami families to see, how they live their lives, and just join them for fishing or preparing a meal, or sitting in the teepee or goatee that it's called in Sami, and or hiking, collecting herbs, whatever. So yes, in that place you can really interact and hear the storytelling from these people. They are people of storytelling, of course, like many nature, peoples. They have an oral tradition. Reading and writing came later, and so there's a possibility, and it's a good chance to learn, because these minorities have been, kind of been treated very harshly also here, just like in many other places. The Swedish government forced a lot of people to move down south because there was too many reindeer up north, ideas like this. There has been, right on racism going on. And there's still traces of that going on.
Yeah.
So that's probably why this, in the end, triggered this lawsuit, getting something back that they feel was stolen.
And I think many, many, many countries in this world could face the same type of situation in court, maybe, with talking about, just what you described. I could see that happening in Canada, the US, Australia, New Zealand, so many places, all over Africa. And that's also part of what makes it interesting, because there's a lot of ramifications there in Sweden, but potentially also big ramifications throughout the rest of the world and community.
I think so. It's very interesting. And that's, even though initially it posed a threat on my existence, on my business, I think it's still so interesting in being in pioneering these things. It's interesting to see what happens, and it's also interesting that's part of the adventure travel to solve problems. That's part of adventure travel, right? If it goes just smooth and perfect, get on the bus here and get off here to see the statue and then go home.
That'd be so boring.
Exactly. So you need these little challenges, at least as a business owner. I think it's, making connections and trying to understand each other. That's the thing. Different cultures trying to understand the other part.
Well, and that goes back to earlier in the conversation. We used the word creativity.
Yep.
Whether that's in music or business or creative solutions, curiosity about understanding other cultures and figuring out different ways that we can make this work in a way that benefits everybody. So I get it. I get why you're excited about this stuff. So very cool. We discussed a lot of, go ahead.
No, you grow up also. In the beginning, you just want to fish, and then you become an adult and you kind of want to discover other things,
Yeah, I can relate to that. I was fishing guide in my 20s and managing fishing lodges and working for Orvis in my 20s and early 30s. And I got to the point where it's like, I'm actually frankly much more interested in the general adventure tourism space as opposed to just the fishing. So like listening to you describe your lodge up north with the Sami people and really like, I could probably go there for a week and never touch a fly rod and be totally happy just to explore and see, maybe watch other people fish and just take in things, because that can be a challenge with fishing. Is like we discussed earlier, it can be very focused. Sometimes you miss things around you.
Yeah.
But that's for each person to figure out on their own and decide how they want to deal with that when it comes up. But Per, we've had a great conversation, covered a lot of things. I have a feeling we could probably do 2 or 3 episodes, but on this particular episode, I want to know, what did I forget to ask you? What should I have asked you, or what do you want to make sure that our listeners hear before we wrap this up?
I don't really have anything. I was just hoping to have a good conversation. I think we did. So
how did we do? I think so too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I feel happy, or just reach out if you have questions.
All right. Very cool. Hey, one thing I do want to mention real quick. The last time we spoke a few weeks ago, and you sent me over a video from YouTube where someone had done kind of a little feature piece on you and your business. And I mentioned to you that I watched that with my son and just thought it was really, really well done. And I know this is a podcast, but I want to mention that. Is that something you have linked on your website? If someone were to go to your website, would they be able to find that video?
Not right now, but I mean, it's easy. I actually had that suggested to me the other day that it should be there. So maybe I should put it there.
Okay. Well, let me share with you what I was thinking. And the reason I wanted to bring this up for our listeners, anybody that's interested, in Per's interesting story and just Sweden, and just the stuff we're discussing, I would highly encourage you to click the link in the show notes, where that'll take you directly to Per's website. And maybe by the time you're listening to this, he will have it linked on his website. But here's the thing, even if he doesn't, the link to his website is in the show notes. Obviously, you've got his name. If you go to YouTube and you type in, I'm sure if they type in your name into YouTube, Per, they're going to find it. They go to your website, they can figure it out. It was just a really, really cool little thing that they'd put together. So I wanted to mention that for the listeners because I think they could enjoy it.
It's made by Swedish Lapland. It's like a destination management organization up there, and they wanted to do something around me and the music and the business. So it's all my music. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it was very cool, and I've seen a lot of travel videos and a lot of travel type related stuff in yours. That was really different. I thought it was really cool. So I wanted to mention that for anybody that might be interested. So, all right.
Thank you very much, Jason.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you taking time to chat with us, and I look forward to working on some projects with you in the future, and hopefully visiting you there in Sweden, not Scotland. I like Scotland. That's a different conversation.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks, Per. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you very much.
I trust you enjoyed listening to the conversation as much as I enjoyed recording it. If you're enjoying the Big World Made Small podcast, please take a moment to tell the algorithm by subscribing and posting a review so that others can benefit as well. I also invite you to take a quick trip over to bigworldmadesmall.com and join our private adventure travel community to receive new episode notifications, special access to our guest experts, and perhaps even some exclusive partner offers that we haven't discussed on the podcast. I'll publish another episode soon. Until then, keep exploring. It's the best way to make a big world feel just a bit smaller.